Chapter 3. Hunter strolled past Katy and Devin. Katy's brilliant green eyes following him after he reached the last step of the stairs, making a left turn into the kitchen on his way to the hospital. Devin reached for Katy's face and tilted it back in his direction and whispered in her ear. He propped one arm against a column and leaned into her body. His hard manhood was inescapable and enticing. Katy smiled broadly. Hunter made an effort not to look their way when he approached them, but he felt Katy staring at him, and he felt relieved. To act unaffected by their passionate regard for each other had to be the most difficult thing he had encountered lately, but he pulled it off. With a brooding gaze, Hunter raised his head and tried not to appear upset. Katy and Devin make a handsome couple, he thought. He saw himself with her, but it wasn't him, it was his twin Devin, kissing and whispering in the ear of the girl he desired. One second he cursed having a twin, and the next second he thought about all the times they had been close, but it would take a female, and a human one at that, to separate them. If he had to lose her, why not to Devin? At least he would get to see her on a few occasions. He gave out a closed, gracious smile and nodded his head at them, conceding that she belonged to Devin. After Hunter drifted past them and went out of sight, Devin felt a change in Katy. He held her hand tight, but she didn't respond. Normally she would close her grip on his large hands, and he knew they were one. He knew that she wanted him, and tonight on the full moon he would spend that time making love to her, but this time was different. Katy's hand felt loose and limp. "Do you want to come with us?" Devin said, turning and shouting to Hunter, who had disappeared in the hallway to the kitchen. Hunter, on hearing Devin, reached the door and turned back around, walking slowly back to them. He glanced at them with a raised eyebrow, not understanding the meaning of the gesture. "Into town, I mean. There's this new bar Katy likes," a cheerful Devin said, to a subdued Hunter. Just when he was determined not to let his feelings for Katy affect his relationship with his brother, and act like a jealous lover, Devin's invitation to him to be the third in a crowd proved too tempting to resist. Hunter certainly didn't want to be with them and have to see them laughing and kissing each other again, while he sat without a date. Katy gazed up at Hunter, her big innocent eyes inviting him to come with them. He remembered her eyes as she had once invited him to make love to her, and he had. There was no resisting her wishes when she looked like that, wide-eyed and beautiful. It was that same look that sealed his fate. That same look that drove him mad with lust. That same look he remembered when they lay together and he made love to her, and he would have continued making love to her over and over again if Bane hadn't changed his life. Turning to answer Devin, he took a thoughtful glance at Katy dressed in a pair of tight blue jeans, a white tee, and a black leather jacket. He recognized the jacket. It was his, but he didn't mention it. Perhaps she had forgotten. She glanced up at him, and he knew Katy remembered when she had shivered from the cold, and he had thrown the jacket around her shoulders. She had smelled his scent of wildflowers and musk, and she smiled, looking at him. Placing her hand around his leather jacket, she had said to him then, "I will never forget you. It will remind me of you when I'm not with you. I'll take it with me to college." And she gazed into Hunter's eyes. "I like you, Hunter. I want you to be my first. I like you too, Katy, but I think I love you. I'll want you to tell me one day that you love me," Hunter had said, when he first lay with Katy on the daybed in the shed, and after he had taken her in his arms and they had made love together, before Bane had tied him up and thrown him in a cage like an animal. He made the jacket a present to her the night when they had ridden Lysel's horses out into the chilly spring night. He had found it in a saddlebag draped across the horse. Noticeably, she had kept it like she'd promised. Now she was wearing it on a date with his brother. It took time, but he made a hard decision. "I think I'll stay here and see to the young girl. You two go and enjoy yourselves." He gave a thin smile. "If you change your mind, it's on Main Street, and the name of the bar is Hard Times. It's across the street from Ray's Hardware," Devin said, placing his arm around Katy's shoulder. Is it a new club? I don't remember father or mother talking about it, Hunter questioned. Yeah, Devin said, turning around. It's where all the young shifters hang out who are new in town. I don't think father likes it, but he said they needed a place to work off some of their frustrations, so he sanctioned the opening of it. You have college students driving miles to get there who've heard about the place, and now it's full every Saturday night, Katy said. Tonight is Saturday? I almost forgot, Hunter added, looking Katy in the eyes. Devin turned her around, aiming her toward the door. We have to go. We're meeting some of Katy's friends there at 11, Devin said, looking back, inching Katy to the door. If you change your mind, you can find us in the back in a booth, or in the pool room, Devin added, and they left Hunter standing there wondering why he had come home in the first place, but then he remembered Haley, and he rushed to the kitchen, and outside, passing the barn and stables with the horses' stalls. Then he passed the dog kennels and took the path to the hospital. When he opened the door to the room, Robert was standing near Haley. I need to get her to the hospital, Hunter. I called an ambulance from Samseville. It will be arriving in a few seconds. Hunter, are you there? Haley struggled to open her eyes. She appeared pale and weak. She tried raising her hand, but it slumped back near her side. Hunter took her hand in his and sat near her bed. Don't leave me, Hunter, Haley said in a small voice. If you do, I think I'll die. If I die, then I can't marry you and take care of you. None of that, Haley. You're not going to die. He wasn't sure if she was being melodramatic, as she usually was, or if it was true that she could. He never knew Robert to be an alarmist, so when he said that she was very sick, he was sure of it. Promise me I won't, Haley said in a faint voice. He glanced at Robert, who shook his head. He didn't know. Hunter didn't want to promise her something he couldn't keep. He had to think fast, and he unintentionally said, because if you die, then I can't marry you. Haley looked up at Hunter in relief with a weak smile, and her eyes closed. He showed Robert a worried look, his eyes darkening. He wasn't a wolf to smile often, but lately there were few and far in between the next one. He didn't remember the last time he had felt happy. He stumbled over the words about marrying her. The only person he would have wanted to marry was no longer his. He had just said that to appease a sick young girl and give her a reason to live, like when he had needed one too. Haley, I need you not to speak to anyone who comes to your bed asking questions. You have to go to the hospital. Her eyes opened with small slits. Will you go with me? Hunter glanced up at Robert and he shook his head yes, then he gestured for Hunter to step into the next room. Hunter followed. I don't think she will make it. Hunter's eyes grew wide and cold and settled on the floor, then he looked up and met Robert's gaze. See that she does. Robert pulled his arm from Hunter's grip. Hunter didn't realize that he had reached for Robert's arm during the conversation. His strong hands had wrapped around his wrist and cut off Robert's circulation. Robert stood back in surprise. You need to control your temper. I swear if I didn't know better, I would think you're Lysel's offspring, Robert said, stepping back, getting out of range of Hunter's long grasp. A knock came to the door, and in rushed paramedics pushing a gurney. Robert pointed, and they proceeded to place Haley on the stretcher. She glanced up, barely opening her eyes, and reached for Hunter. You are all she has, Hunter. Didn't you say you're her guardian? Now act like it. Robert left to get his bag. Robert hurried into the ambulance to find Hunter already sitting with Haley, her hand in his. Haley's eyes were closed, her hand limp, her body cold. Chapter 4. It took 10 minutes to get to Samseville, traveling on the new road constructed for the convenience of Adrian, for shopping purposes. The hospital where the ambulance was transporting Haley to was furnished with all the latest equipment. A new wing of the hospital had just opened. It had a trauma and cancer research center. Robert had recruited young doctors to work with some of the older, more experienced doctors. As a team, they would treat and find cures for diseases that plagued both werewolves and humans. It took 1 minute for the ambulance to pull up to the state-of-the-art research hospital and stop at the emergency entrance. There were no hospitals as advanced and none as unknown to outsiders as the Samsa Medical Center. Hunter's grandfather had built it and the town when he'd established his pack, back in the day when no one knew there were shifters or cared. I've never seen the town lit up like this on a Saturday night. Everything has changed. I remember when this place had no more than 1,000 people, and they were all humans, Hunter said, climbing out of the ambulance. Just look at the cars. That's because of all the shifters coming here to get protection. Wilder and Devin are responsible for turning this town into a haven for every kind of shifter. I never knew there were bear shifters, Robert said to Hunter. Hunter laughed. He had never seen them either. He could have met some in Alaska and never known what they were. Maybe they've guarded their secrets better than us, Hunter thought. They are creating problems for Wilder and your uncles. You have young humans who get drunk and drive back to San Francisco, or where there are local motels. They tear up the place with crazy parties, and then get into wrecks on the highway. This is happening too frequently, and the townspeople can't handle all the ruckus and carnage. We had to hire more doctors on a Saturday night because of all the drunk young shifters and their human girlfriends, Robert said, casting an unapologetic and unsympathetic look at Hunter. I guess you don't approve of my brother being with Katy? Hunter said, walking along with Robert to the front desk. Wilder asked me to give a hand to the local doctors because the new hires knew little or nothing about shifters. We had them sign a non-disclosure before they were hired, not that they would divulge what they knew, but we had to be careful all the same. These young doctors and nurses want to work, and at the high salaries Wilder is paying them, they are dedicated to their work and to this place. When they reached the front desk, Haley had been put into a private room in the children's wing, especially reserved for the Samses. The head nurse gave Hunter directions to Haley's room. I'll meet you there after I talk to the doctors, Robert assured Hunter. Hunter ambled to Haley's room and to Haley's bedside. He noticed that she lay unusually still. He whispered her name, but she didn't respond. He looked at her and sat down near her bed, held her hand, and stayed with her. A nurse came into the room an hour later to find Hunter sitting near Haley, his head down, his face wearing a grim, sad look. Hunter's blue eyes were dark, his face a ghostly pale color. Are you her father? No. I'm her guardian. She smiled at Hunter. I didn't think so. You're a little too young to have a teenage daughter. How do you know? When you walked out earlier, she woke and said she was 19. She looks about that age, and the development of her body puts her around 19. What are you? 21? See, you couldn't be her father, the young nurse said, grinning shamelessly at him. He had never noticed Haley's body. She looked to him like an annoying 12 or 15-year-old child. To him she was no more than 15, but she acted as if she was 12. It was her constant annoying rhetoric of her insistence on marrying him, where he thought she was much younger. Most young girls had crushes on older men. He laughed when he thought of himself as older. He had just made 19 when he first met Katy, and now he was 21. Old for a werewolf. Glancing down at Haley, his thoughts rest on Katy. Hunter wished Katy had said the same thing to him that Haley had said. If he hadn't promised her father to take care of her, he wouldn't be in the hospital now. He could be out making the most of his young life, trying to get Katy back from his brother. Now he was tending to a girl he didn't know, and she was complicating his life. The nurse walked out after taking Haley's temperature and blood pressure and saying, "Don't worry, Mr. Samsa, we've never lost a patient, and because she's young, I doubt that she will be here more than 3 days, then you can take her home." That was the last thing he wanted to do. He thought about asking Katy to keep her for a while, until he could figure something out. Then he could have a reason to see Katy. Hunter stood glancing at Haley sleeping peacefully, after the nurse administered her meds. She's not going to miss me, he thought. On his way out of the hospital room, he met Robert. I should be back before she wakes. I have something to take care of. Hunter didn't wait for a reply. He walked down the corridor and took an elevator down to the first floor. On the elevator, the young nurse was walking in the direction of the exit. Hunter didn't recognize her because she had her hair down and she had changed her clothes. When they both arrived at the front door, he stepped aside and opened the door for her. The nurse paused. Thank you, Mr. Samsa. You don't recognize me, do you? No. I don't. I'm the nurse for the teenager you brought into the hospital. My name is Christine. She held out her hand and he looked at it for a moment, and then he shook. You certainly have a strong grip. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. My name is Hunter. You didn't hurt me. It would take more than that. I have to lift patients most days. Christine's smile was engaging and warm, her voice mild and interesting. It had been a long time since Hunter had enjoyed a conversation with a woman, human or female. It had been even longer since he'd had sex, and he thought of sex all the time, especially since the moon was full. Would you like a cup of coffee? Hunter said, tilting his head to the right, his blue eyes charming, and his half-smile engaging her. Hell no. A stiff drink would do me fine. He tilted his head to the left and looked down at her. My kind of woman, he thought. Where would you suggest we get a stiff drink? Hunter questioned. Don't you know? It's your town. I've been traveling abroad for 2 years. This used to be a small town. Now I don't recognize it with all these homes and businesses and neighborhoods cropping up everywhere. Just follow me. She led him to the parking lot and opened her new Honda Civic. Then she opened the door on the passenger side and Hunter slid in the car with her. Thanks to your family, I have a job, and I got my nurse's license about 3 years ago. I volunteered here when I was in high school. I'm doing great now, got me this new car and a nice apartment that your father built. She smiled broadly. Christine started the keyless ignition, and they were off and driving to Main Street. She was a pretty blonde with brown eyes. Maybe bleached blonde, but Hunter didn't care. It was the night of the full moon. Hunter knew she wasn't a female because the last time he was home, none were in his town, none but Katy, and none were working at the family businesses, and he could smell her. She didn't repel him. She had that smell he had grown used to in female humans, soap and flowery shower gel. Besides, females didn't work. They were too busy taking care of the weremales, cooking and cleaning, and giving sexual favors to the alphas in their packs. Because of a disease that they had contracted, the young females were barren, and rarely any young pups were born, except for the Samsas. There seemed to be a heap of them now. It appeared Wilder had finally got the family and the pack he wanted and needed. When Christine finally stopped her car, they were in front of the club Devin and Katy were hanging out in. Cars of all kinds were parked all around the bar, and in the large parking area out back. As she was cruising looking for a parking space, someone was hurriedly pulling out, so Christine pulled in and stopped. Hunter jumped out in a second and in a flash was standing near her door. He opened the car door for Christine. Surprised at how quick and courteous he was, she said, "Why thanks, Mr. Samsa." She swiveled around and took Hunter's extended hand. Getting out of the car, her short dress exposed her toned thighs. Hunter couldn't help but take notice. "Call me Hunter. Mr. Samsa is for strangers. I plan on knowing everything about you tonight." He shot her a striking, dazzling white smile. "Hunter it is," Christine said, returning a smile of equal brilliance as her brown eyes twinkled, because of the sexual tension between them. Hunter stopped at the door. Have you been here before? No, but I heard that it was the place to be on a Saturday night if you're looking for danger and a good time, Christine said, raising both eyebrows at Hunter and shooting him a mysterious smile. Do you know what I am? His face changed and he became reserved. The lights at the door glimmered over his handsome face. Christine liked what she saw. Hunter's features were perfect and rugged. Yes. Everyone in Samseville knows who the Samses are, and I don't care if you don't mind being with a human. A wide smile came over Hunter. His eyes lit up, and he felt like himself again. He opened the door, and the bear shifter at the second door smiled and said, "Go on in, Mr. Samsa. Your brother is in the back." Christine glanced up at Hunter. I like traveling with royalty. The music and sound of grunts and moans resonated throughout the bar, over the loud music of guitar solos. We're not royalty. The hell if you're not. She tucked her hand under his arm. As they walked in the dim-lit room, it appeared smaller than it actually was. The facade on the outside of the bar was unassuming, but once you walked inside, the area away from the bar was a dance floor with hundreds of people and shifters of all kinds, dancing to music from rap to rock and roll. The atmosphere in the room was of happiness and pleasure, because some shifters had boundless energy. The werewolves were dancing and jumping and howling as the music boomed throughout the place. The shifters could dance all night and never stop, as well as drink all night and never get drunk. The lights were spinning around, and the colors were changing every second. The DJ, a known shifter lover, was spinning the music, and when he tired of spinning, he attached an iPod with endless songs of all types playing non-stop, but from the looks on the faces of the humans and shifters, they loved it, or that could be the drinks, or whatever they had consumed had them stoned. The shifters and humans worked hard for the Samses, and now they were playing equally hard, Hunter thought, as he pushed past them on the crowded dance floor in search of his brother and Katy. As Hunter and Christine made it through the crowd, his sharp ears could hear Katy's voice over all of the hundreds of voices in the large arena. Hunter looked to the right of him, and there sat Devin and Katy. Devin spotted him and waved. Hunter took Christine's hand and led the way through a multitude of human young men and women, and male and female shifters. When Devin saw them, he slid over. Devin sat on the end and Katy positioned herself in the middle, looking carefully at Christine, taking in her long blonde hair, the bright red color of lip gloss, as well as her short thin dress and a pair of cowboy boots. Hunter stood aside, looking at Katy. Their eyes met and the desire for Katy was too strong for him to resist, so he let Christine slide in next to her. When Hunter was seated, Devin raised his hand, and a young woman dressed in a fox costume came to the table. What will you have, Mr. Samsa? Her eyes shot to Hunter and then to Devin. You didn't tell me you had a twin. Katy looked at Devin in surprise. And I didn't tell you that Katy is my fiancée. Devin took her hand and looked in Katy's eyes, then kissed her palms. Devin's voice cracked through nervousness. He tried to stop the waitress before she said something embarrassing, like they had been intimate. The tiny waitress, wearing a skimpy fox uniform cut low in front, showing a pair of impressive breasts, a large ass with a pair of faux fox ears on her head, and possessing the arrogance of a former lover, or maybe a present lover, and Hunter knew that all too well.